My friend Stash is live with part two, talking about the contribution in World War II of the Polish cryptographers, the Cipher Bureau, the radio unit led by Major and then later Colonel Guido Lager, Marian Wojcicki, and Jerzy Ryzikowski and Heinrich Zelinski, the Poznan University crew. As I mentioned in the previous broadcast, during the Polish-Soviet War of 1919-1920, the Polish Cipher Bureau already had a lot of success, and they had broken the Soviet codes. Through their efforts, they were able to discover a large gap on the Red Army's left flank during the Battle of Warsaw. Marion Cooper, a pilot who would later go on to make the movie King Kong, the old one, fought alongside the Poles in that war, which is virtually unknown. They discovered the Red Army's codes, even orders from Mr. Trotsky himself. Not that well known and not that popular in American history. Okay, so in World War II, the leader and the chief of the radio intelligence officers was Major Guido Langer. I actually saw, it's funny, I saw one of these real history things, and they said, well, the Germans weren't able to win the war because Guido Lager and his crew from Poznan broke the codes. As I will say a number of times in this little vlogcast, indeed, Alan Turing did a tremendous work on the Enigma. And he is given all the credit for it, when in fact the Polish cryptographers broke the codes, and Marian Wojcicki created what he called the bomba cryptographer, which was a kind of a simulacrum of the Enigma machine itself. So they obtained a commercial Enigma machine and were able to later break the military Enigma. On July 25th and 26th of 1939, dude, Preston and Dr. Igor are here. We're talking about some unknown stuff. That's right. Red Star, White Eagle. Read the book by Norman Davis. A very, very unknown Piłsudski won the big battle between the Soviets and the Poles. Backed up by Marion Cooper as a pilot of King Kong fame. Polish power. Hey, Gene. So, General Tadeusz Pelzki, Pelzczynski, with the umlaut over the N. The umlaut? What am I talking, German? I don't know. Sorry. I'll have his name in the line notes. A significant part of the war was July 26, 1939, 5 weeks before the war broke out. The Poles handed over what they knew about Enigma. The head of Bletchley Park said Ultra would have never gotten off the ground if we had not learned from the Poles in the nick of time the details of both the German military Enigma machine and the operating procedures that were in use. The critical contribution of the Polish remains of little known outside Poland. The Bomba Cryptologica, that was Radzicki's name for it, had a special purpose that was developed by Radzicki. The British and indeed the French were stunned when the Poles turned them over this information on July 26, 1939. The Poles cracked the codes of the machine. They saw that math was the key and not linguistics. The Polish government has been calling for recognition on this, but they haven't got much. Nothing can much compare. Zbigniew? Are you talking about Szpyzinski? Yeah. Good evening and welcome. I'm bitching about how the Polish cryptographers were not given, let's face it, not given any credit at all. Most of the people in the world know about this story from the Imitation Game with the very, very attractive Keira Knightley and Benedict. I never can pronounce his name right. The guy who played Doctor Strange. KC's here. For a long time, Churchill did not want anybody to talk about it. Nobody at Bletchley Park. Bletchley Park is that kind of cool-looking old British castle-like building where they broke the codes or worked on breaking the codes. The Cipher Bureau was created in May of 1919 during the Polish-Soviet War of 1919-1921. The Bureau broke the Soviet cryptological codes, and this was, of course, the war prior. The next time in World War II, the group continued to work on codes. They saw that it was key to work on it, and you want to remember that the group came out of Poznan. Yay! But this is how history goes now. And there are big wars, but actually still most people don't fight in the wars. They learn about the wars from major motion pictures like The Imitation Game, which, as you can expect, barely, if at all, mentions the Polish contribution, which was considerable. They also assisted with Heinrich Zaleski, who created these perforated sheets. And the Poles broke the codes for a long time. The Germans increased the sophistication on it, so they were only able to go to a certain point, but they did break them. Admittedly, they needed a lot of złotys to continue to produce the perforated sheets. But they had the codes broken, and they saved the British a lot of time. Their contribution was of inestimable value, of major value. Radzicki himself actually commented on it in terms of the reality of the situation being recognized. I would imagine he was probably pretty stunned that he had to remain silent, and they didn't much not only didn't they give him credit, I mean, there was, you could say, well, they had to keep it top secret or whatever, and Churchill said so. But I don't know if it was a good idea to not have them work directly with Turing. Turing did meet with the Poles anyway, and he did take a look at the reconstructed Enigma, the simulacrum Enigma as I call it. And Turing did the same thing. He created his own Enigma just like Radzicki. There is a historian that studied cryptological stuff, a David Kane, who said that Marian Rejewski created the math theorem that the math formula that won the war. Freaking Hollywood. That's right. Also, which is very stunning, the fighter pilot squadron of World War II, Marion Cooper was kind of an influence on that. Was the 303 Kosciuszko Squadron, so they had the most kills in the Battle of Britain, which you could argue was the most sophisticated air war in history. And so they remain probably the best fighter squadron ever. Their leader was Witold Pilecki. And I'm going to go into them another night. So they recognized that the Germans were building up and they had success in the war with Russia, 1919, 1920, 21. So they started a training group out of Poznan University, and the three top guys were Rejewski, Jerzy Rosicki, Jerry Rocik, and Heinrich Zulitsky. They were dedicated completely to cryptography. And the Poles realized, again, going with mathematics over linguistics to solve the code breaking was the way to go. The Poles early on knew the Germans had a machine called the Enigma, which was developed by a Mr. Arthur Schirmbus of the Berlin suburb of Williamsdorf. He called his invention the reflector. He did not have much luck in selling this in Germany, but the German Navy took a liking to it. Yes. The codes probably were the key. I say they were the key. I don't think Germany could win the war without the codes being broken. Another major point was the United States created the Bodyguard of Lies, or Operation Bodyguard. The idea was to scare the heck out of the Germans, making them think they had a special, massive army of 50 divisions led by the greatest battlefield commander that would be General George S. Patton. Yes, I have heard that. Yes, they had some Spitfires, but I've heard that. They started out giving them shitty planes and everything. They didn't really want them to fight. There is a motion picture that isn't too bad that portrays them. And Milo Gibson, the son of Mel Gibson, is in it, along with a guy who's the greatest, the biggest actor in Poland now, who also played Kuklinski, not Kuklinski, the Iceman, who was the Iceman, the greatest hitman in the United States is, of course, the Iceman. Richard Kuklinski. There was another Richard Kuklinski, who was the greatest spy of Poland during the Cold War, who Jimmy Carter was blind in Poland, and in Poland and Russia, and Kuklinski did turn double and help out the Carter administration very greatly. They had nothing behind the Iron Curtain. The Enigma. The Germans indeed thought that nobody could break it. They thought that nobody could break the codes, and they paid for that. But it was a good idea. on the face of it, but anything that can be done can be undone, and they did it. The Poznan University crew. Any questions? Mel Gibson was great in Braveheart, yes. But they'll never take our freedom! The settings were changed daily on the device. I did get a look at it at the British Museum in London. It looks like a mysterious typewriter with these big rotors on it, indeed. Were you saying Zbigniew Polish? Yes, I went into that, and I'm going to do another diatribe on that. Will probably get me in trouble about the blaming everything on Zbigniew Brzezinski, who he was indeed a hard ass, but he was 100% pro-American statesman under Jimmy Carter. He's the entire funding of the Mujahideen, or the freedom fighters in Afghanistan. Is blamed on Brzezinski. Yes. Yes, the Germans were really doing well with their submarines, and breaking the Enigma really put a dent in that. Also, Stalin distrusted using it, but I believe he did eventually take information on that, and they had everything they needed to have on Operation Barbarossa. Or Army Group Center, or whatever the hell it was, on the big wars at Kursk and Stalingrad, and arguably anything else like that. I hope my overview was somewhat helpful on this. My main point of the history movies do a really bad job of portraying these things. There's a movie with Kate Winslet, Enigma, which goes into the sub portion. And thank you, Gene. That is quite insulting because it gives the idea that there's a Polish scientist cryptologist portrayed in that movie, but he betrays the British intelligence and goes with the Nazis, which is pathetic and ridiculous. And there's always more to things than meet the eye. I don't mean to get into some kind of war about who's more oppressed or whatever, but in today's society, I think I'm sure that Mr. Alan Turing went through some hard times because of who he was and so forth. But it's no doubt that now, with the power of the media, I mean, he's clearly given 100% credit for it. There is a controversial, little-known book called Hollywood's War on Poland. And I did a review of it. Not that many people checked it out, but it's a very disturbing book that, when Poland was really kind of sandwiched in between the Soviet Russians and the fascist Germans, or the Nazis, or the National Social, or German and Russia, or whatever you want to say. And they didn't get any helpful propaganda or any kind of aid from over here. In fact, they were betrayed as imbeciles, traitors, ignorant, and fools. And there were just all these movies like that. And at their worst time, when they were slaughtered, a lot of civilians even, during the Warsaw Uprising, I mean, they did a comedy at that time, which I really thought was a bummer. I hope this was helpful, my friends. Now 20 minutes in. What do you guys think? Questions and comments from the chat room. All right, good. Actually, Dr. Igor KC, JB, I'm going to shut down for a second and leave this for information for people coming out 20. It's about 18 minutes of pretty good information. I'm going to jump back in. Let's have live, regular chat and go at it. Let's have some humor and tomfoolery. I'll be back with you in 1 minute. Look for the next live chat so we can just chat about general subjects together. I'm leaving this one for historical purposes of part 1, how the Poles were robbed and not given the proper credit or recognition for breaking the Enigma, greatly assisting the Allies, saving Bletchley Park a lot of time. Maybe the war was ended sooner, in part because of the efforts of not just the British code breakers, but the Poles as well. I'll be back with you shortly. Ciao, ciao.